if you are watching this in the replay, to put a 2 in the comments. We're starting on time now, but I'm starting on Instagram, and I'm talking on Instagram to let all of you know on Instagram to head over to GOGOTIX.co. I'm about to put it in the pin it in the comments. We are going live on YouTube, and you can get directly to the live from GOGOTIX.co. Just click the show for today, and you can click watch, and it will go to the YouTube. So we're on YouTube Live right now. Okay, it's pinned in the comments. So we're on YouTube Live right now with John O'Neill, the director of programming for City Winery, talent buyer extraordinaire. Everybody on Instagram, I'm only going to be on here for like another minute. So go to GOGOTIX.co right now, click on watch on today's show, and we're about to get started with John O'Neill from City Winery. So head on over to GOGOTIX.co, click watch, and we'll be on YouTube with John O'Neill. Thank you, John, for joining us. Instagram, I'm signing off. Go to YouTube. Go to GOGOTIX.co and get on YouTube. See you soon. How you doing, John?
There's a lot going on your end today.
Yeah, man, I'm like a big time like producer and stuff over here. You know what I mean? Like
you're doing the whole deal, man. Like you're starring and directing and producing.
I know.
You're doing it all.
My producer quit. She was just like, "I'm done with you. I'm tired of your shit," and she just left. And she was like,
she just went to the sofa and had a yogurt.
Yeah, pretty much yogurt. Yeah. All right, so you're looking a little blurry over there, but we can hear you fine, I think, at least. If you're on the feed and you're having any problems hearing John, let us know. But as of right now, I can hear you fine. So hopefully that's the case for everybody else too. I know that you are at the venue right now, right?
I am at the venue. Today I was carrying furniture all around. Very exciting stuff. Mopping floors, carrying furniture.
That's big time.
It's the life.
Big time director level work over there.
I'm not your level yet. I'm aspiring to get there, man.
I got you. Well, so all right, we're starting to get some people to coming on now. So can you give us a little bit of history of how you got into the music industry and started doing what you're doing for a living?
Yes, sure. Children, I'm living proof that you should stay in school and get a degree and don't rely on music. My path was it was a circuitous route to get where I got. It was almost an accidental career. I started in radio, and then a fellow that worked for a local weekly newspaper, when those things were still a thing, heard my show and said, "Hey, do you ever think about writing?" And it turned out I was a natural, and I did that. And I just became really friendly with bands, and started booking for fun. I was bartending on weekends and writing, and I would just book bands that I knew to come play this little corner Irish pub. And the regulars wouldn't know what the hell to do with any of it. And I would just have a good time and have the band stay over my house and cook them a meal. And
aren't you a nice person?
What's that?
I said, well, aren't you a nice person?
I just love music, man. And it just kind of cycled from there. I continued writing. I moved to San Francisco. I was writing. The .com bubble burst in 2000. The guy who lived down the street from me had a restaurant business. And it just started, I know some bands. And it just extrapolated out from there. And then I moved to Austin, Texas, and ended up booking a place called Antone's, which is one of the three, I guess you would call it like anchor original Austin venues. And I had really no right to be doing it, but the owner really liked me. He gave me an informational interview, and at one point he said, "Buddy, I don't have anything for you, but I like your gray matter." And that somehow ended up working out.
Let me stop you for 1 second. What's an informational interview? Because I don't think that's something that a lot of people know what it is.
A friend set me up with the owner just to go have some barbecue, and we just talked informally about stuff, and talked about kind of like what we're doing right now. Just talked about where I was and what I was doing and what I wanted to do, and what he was looking for, and it ended up just kind of working out. And then it parlayed. Like I said, I really honestly had no right at all booking this venue, frankly, with the amount of experience I had. But the cat dug me. I dug him. It was a good crew. I ended up doing that. And then I'd gotten into working with a management company, like Mike Crowley, Crowley Management. And he had two cats from Austin, Hayes Carl and Bob Schneider, who were both really kind of big deals at what they did. Like Bob's kind of the king shit of Austin, and Hayes is one of the really premier Americana artists. So I ended up helping him out. And then one day I got a phone call from Hill Country Barbecue up in New York. They wanted somebody to come and run their DC stage and do some buying for the New York stage. So I loaded up my car and came to DC, and then City Winery called. Maybe I called them. I forget. Somebody called somebody. And I came over here to Ivy City and looked at the place, and it was 42,000 square feet of concrete and rebar and a bunch of dreams, and it appealed to me. So I said, sign me up, and that was 2 years ago. And here I am. Here I am moving tables.
Big fancy guy. So what made you decide to go from, what made you decide to say yes to go from Austin to DC?
I think when you're booking, if you want to book at bands, it's almost like you get to a certain level when there are only so many jobs. It's not like when I was bartending, I could go bartend anywhere and do it, you know, and it could be a career. Like I did it in San Francisco, I did it in Massachusetts when I was there. I didn't do it in Austin, but I always could have fallen back on it. I think, you know, when you're booking, there are a finite amount of jobs that you can go to. Like, and sometimes it means saddling up your horse and going to where the job is. Once you get to a certain level. And the reason the Hill Country thing appealed to me is I dug the guy that was running the program. He's actually a really good friend of mine now, Seth Rothschild. We just clicked, and I wanted to give it a try because it seemed like it was a really interesting proposition. And it ended up just becoming a great thing because I essentially just ended up kind of booking my record collection and things that I thought were kind of cool, which it was a really interesting opportunity in that it was bottom line versus art a lot. There was a lot of art involved and a lot of doing shows for the right reason, like not necessarily guys who would pack a joint, but guys who were important songwriters or guys who were probably producers first, but songwriters second, but they like their resume was cuckoo. And Hill Country was the type of place where if I just went to the ownership and explained why these guys were important, they'd be like, okay, book it. Which is super enticing if you're a music fan and happen to be a guy that makes money, makes a living booking shows, but to be able to book stuff with a lot of artistic integrity. I mean, who's not going to give that a shot? And then consequently, the City Winery thing, it was just one of those deals where I've been doing Hill Country for a while, and it was great, and there were no problems, but it just really seemed like this was going to be a chance for me to really spread my wings a little more, one. And two, there's no doubt that it was going to take a lot of work to get this going. And I don't mind working hard. I actually kind of like, and I like being in from the ground floor. And in this particular case, like the marketing manager, myself, the general manager, the floor managers, we physically helped build this thing. We were pumping beer coolers and moving piles of trash. So we were really in it from
all the way up until today, right? When you're moving chairs and tables.
Still moving shit around.
Yeah. Well, so a couple of things to tie back to some of the people that are probably watching. So one thing is that some of them may remember when I used to bring the go-go bands to Live Casino on Tuesday nights, and my sort of number two there was a guy named Dustin who was at the door every night. And he ended up taking your place at Hill Country Barbecue. And we, maybe last year or something, we did a couple of go-go shows over there too, but obviously it's not, that's not really their bag. And then the other thing that some people may or may not know is that City Winery is the Old Love nightclub, which was a huge mega club and very famous for having an owner named Mark Barnes, who got his start promoting go-go. And then very famously, when he became sort of a big deal, decided that he didn't want to have go-go in any of his clubs. So the segue for that is, what made you decide oh wow, you cleared up for a second. Oh, now you're fuzzy again. What made you decide to embrace go-go from day one? Because typically what happens in DC is a big fancy nightclub or fancy venue will open up and it'll be all the rage and all the talk of the town, and they're too good for go-go. And then when the money starts drying up and they're not doing well anymore, then they want to call the go-go bands because they know that the go-go bands can draw people every night. And I want to make sure this is clear, because I think a lot of people don't understand that. Like, I remember I was in DC before you guys even opened, and Shlomo called me, who's the what's his title again? He's the national.
He's the vice president. He's the vice president of programming, so he's my boss.
Yeah, vice president. He called me and asked me about Black Alley, and so we booked Black Alley in there. And then from that very first, day you opened, you guys have embraced go-go and had go-go programming in there. What is it that you just didn't know any better, or what made you decide to do that?
I think it's a couple of things, right? I've always, when I was in San Francisco, I remember, like I said, I was doing more writing than booking, but I remember my managing editor saying to me, there's not a scene going on here, and me pulling records out of my record collection, being like, these guys, this guy, that guy. And then those ended up being the bands that I would book at this new club. Same thing in Austin. I think in DC. So I guess part of it's me and how I kind of approach it. And that is because I come from a music writer's background, like a quote unquote critics background, that I'm super aware of music history and scenes and the scenes history. Like, DC has super deep roots in so many different genres, whether it's the old jazz corridor, or it's the go-go scene, or it's like there are all these weirdo like Telecaster pros, like super cool guys like Danny Gatt. It's like when Gray started here in the 50s outside of here, like all these guys who are just crusher, twangy guitar players. So I think when I walked into it, it's always been really important to me to have the ability to reflect back to the music community what's already theirs. Did go-go need me? Well, no, I don't think so. Go-go's been doing its own thing now for a long time, since I was quite young, and continues to do well, and has consistently done well. I just think from where I came from, it made sense to be able to reflect back to the community their own music and have a chance to put it on stage. I think it gave an opportunity to also allow local musicians in the local scene to be part of the City Winery experience, and that's important to me. Like, I want the music community to know that we're aware and that we care, and not just necessarily go-go. If you're a local artist and you're doing things yourself, you have a finite amount of albums you're going to be able to put out on your own. But if you're the right guy and the right act, and there's no reason why you shouldn't be playing a really sweet looking and a sweet sounding room, if you're willing to promote it, and like, it should be open to the local music scene. And I'm happy to have a bigger room and a smaller room that I can help develop bands in. And I think the other reason Go-Go made sense for us is, we tend to book a little bit older, and I tell people all the time, I book the same stuff I did 20 years ago, only now, like, I don't want to stand and piss somebody else's urine, in a concrete club. I want to sit down because I got a bad back and sore feet, and you know what I mean? Like, I might have kids and I can only get out once a month. Mm-hmm. So the experience here is you can come out and you do your thing and you sit down and you might have a meal and a couple of drinks and watch a show. So Go-Go made sense for me in that aspect too, because they're in the wheelhouse of where I want to be age-wise, which doesn't mean we don't do younger bands. We do. We develop them. I'm just saying for our main room, it made a lot of sense. And then as it turns out, we've had some big wins financially. The bands and I, like, we've sold out shows and done really well. Mm-hmm. And I've had some misses too, like, don't get me wrong, which is the case with all genres of music. Mm-hmm. So I think Go-Go was just a natural fit.
That I booked, all the bands that I booked were all wins every time. Let's just clear that.
Oh, absolutely. You're Mr. 1000. Like, he bats 1,000 every time.
Indeed.
So I think it's really that simple. A lot of it was just like, I appreciate music history. I also appreciate local musicians. And it just seemed to me that if the opportunity was there to give them the stage, then you give them the stage. So that was a long answer.
No, but that was a good. That's important because there's a lot of people that I think, and that's the reason why I wanted to have you on, because I've seen some comments like in the Go-Go boards and stuff of people that sort of assume that City Winery is maybe like going down the tubes or something like that, because that's generally what happens when venues start putting Go-Go bands in. But I'm always like, no, they've done it from the very beginning, and that's abnormal. And I want to make sure that you guys get credit for that publicly, in the Go-Go community, because, when I started doing it at the casino, it took me a very long time to get people to do it, to the powers that be to approve it. And they didn't even know what Go-Go was like, but just urban music in general, they sort of shied away from until I proved to them that it could work, and then it was great. You know what I mean? But like, I just want to commend you for like not even giving it a second thought. Just been like, yeah, let's do it, let's go.
Well, thank you. That's very, very nice of you to say. But we did think it over for a while. Like, we would have there was a
week, like you booked Blackout like the first weekend or something, didn't you?
I did, but there were a few things about, like, I remember the first time I booked Backyard, and I had a security guy who was just like, "Oh my God, Backyard, it's going to be wild." And I was like, "Dude, it's not the 90s anymore. We're all old as shit. we just want to have fun."
Right. Well, you remember, I didn't pitch you Backyard at the very beginning either, and there's a reason for that. And I know that they were mad at me for not putting them in the casino sooner, but there's a reason for that as well, because I'm aware of that. And so I did the same thing with you that I did at the casino, which is bring in, I guess I hadn't brought Vibe or Subtle into the casino until later, but I brought in the Black Alleys and the Belladonnas and the Chuck Brown bands and those type of bands to sort of be like, okay, like, this is not a scary thing. Like, you know what I mean? This is people that are going to dress up and have a good time and play great music, and it's going to be the best show you've ever had. And
yeah, no, man, like, the vibe is incredible. Go shows. I mean, it's always a blast. It's always fun. I know my guys, my concert manager, Daniel, I don't know if he's watching, but if he is, you're missed. And Jesse, I mean, Daniel's got his own Go-Go name already. They've already nicknamed him.
Yeah.
So we really enjoy being part of it. And, and for my guys, it was a learning experience too. Like, it's a whole genre that Jesse has never worked with previously. And it turns out he's a natural at mixing Go-Go. And Daniel's just great at what he does. So we love it. We always have a good time. And, crowds are always a lot of fun. It's just, so it ended up being, everything I was kind of hoping for and a little bit more. It's just been a good time.
Right. So what do you? So what I'm hoping is that there's some band members or managers or whoever in here, and my overall objective in doing this series is I want to bring on people that not only have experience with go-go locally, but also sort of understand the broader market and have been in other cities and booked other genres of music, and understand, because and I know that the go-go industry and the regular live music industry don't operate on the same set of rules necessarily. So I don't mean that's not a negative thing. That's one of the coolest things about go-go is the fact that the same band can play 3-4 nights a week in the same city and still have 300 to 400 people or whatever come out and see them in different venues, and that doesn't happen anywhere else that I'm aware of. I mean, maybe you've been around more than I have, but I'm not familiar with anywhere else in the world where that happens.
Yeah, there's places like Austin, Texas, that a little bit has to do with geography. Like, people aren't going to leave their neighborhoods or their side of town, and there's a little of the same I see between DC and Austin. Like a guy like Dale Watson, who a lot of your viewers probably aren't familiar with, but old school country cat. He can do 5 or 6 shows a week because it is broken up regionally, geographically, and I think that's an advantage that DC has. And I think to your point about go-go, one of the things I really appreciate about go-go bands and the go-go scene the most is it doesn't behave like anyone else.
Right up your alley, yeah.
And while I think some people would find it frustrating, some of the nuances, I think I've always, as a guy who grew up booking punk clubs, go-go is actually really punk in the way that they behave and do things. There's still a lot of street teaming involved. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of laid backness involved, which makes stuff like sound guys and concert managers mental that they can't advance shows like they would with a quote unquote professional band.
Yeah.
But it's not because go-go's not professional. It just does its own thing. And to me, that's kind of one of the things I really appreciate about it. Mm-hmm. Is it's just off over here doing its own thing, thriving, by the way, on its own, by its own merit, mm-hmm. by its own rules. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that. I actually really like that.
Well, I don't know how familiar you are with the history, but there was a lot of convergence in the 80s with the DC hardcore bands and go-go bands. A lot of them toured together, like Red Hot Chili Peppers used to open for Trouble Funk. Dave Grohl is like a huge Trouble Funk fan. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those. I remember I did an interview. It was probably like 10 years ago or something, with Ian Mackay, who is the founder of Discord Records and sort of a legend in the DC punk hardcore scene. And he knew more about go-go than I did. And I've been playing it for 20 some years. But he was very knowledgeable about it. And so, yeah, there are a lot of similarities.
Totally.
But so my objective has always been, now you're gonna make me feel guilty saying this because of that beautiful diatribe you just had. My objective has always been to expand it beyond just the DC Diamond, right? Or DMV or whatever you want to say. So because of the differences in how the business is run, from a regular go-go band to say a national artist, for example, for the benefit of the people watching who may play in a go-go band or be involved in the go-go scene and know how that works, what do you consider when you are looking to book an artist or a band, like outside of the go-go scene? Like, what is maybe it's the same thing, but like, what are you looking for? Like, what if I'm a an R&B singer or whatever, and I want to pitch myself to you, what are you looking for?
Well, I think I know where you want to go with this, and I think there are just certain there are certain things that are just kind of 101. You know, have a press kit, have a JPEG, you know, a scannable photo, a high-res photo, have an updated bio. You know, I think those are little things. The real thing to get beyond local, and let me preface this by saying there's nothing wrong with staying local. Like if you're in a band and you're still doing 300 tickets or 400 tickets or 100 tickets or whatever you're doing, but it's like bowling night for you and the boys, there's nothing wrong with that as long as everybody's on the same page, music for music's sake, you know, and if there's some money involved, terrific. But to really get beyond that, it is essential to have a team. Now, whether that means management or an agent, PR, you know, again, when I was working with this Austin cat, the King Shit of Austin guy, you know, he could play at will in Austin when he wanted, but you know, he would do this Monday thing every week, and it was just where he would flesh out songs. It would always be a $10 cover, and then he could also go and do the 2,000 cap one on special occasions like Valentine's and Christmas, and go all over the country and put 3 or 4.
I'm sorry, just to interrupt you. When you're saying 2,000 cat, most of these people that are watching are probably not venue guys. So 2,000 cat means capacity. So 2,000 capacity would be the size of the Fillmore in Silver Spring. So this guy can play on Monday night in a small club and then also do well.
Yeah, and he could do that, and he could go, and like twice a year he would go up the West Coast, once acoustic for 5 days, once electric with a full band for 5 days. Same thing in the Midwest, same thing in the Southwest, same thing in the Northeast, and do 200 to 400 tickets in every market. Now, that's a nice little, I would consider to be a cult act, I suppose, on a national level, but it's a nice one, you know, to be able to do that type of thing and do a $25, $30, $40 ticket in all these different areas. And it occurred to me while I was working with this guy that there's this thing that kind of has to happen, you know, because he's going to be grossing over $1 million a year in touring money easily for doing these little things. But there's also a lot of cost involved, but it's cost that makes sense. There's a percentage to management. There's a percentage to the agent. There's a percentage to stuff that you don't have to worry about further down the road, like business manager and things like that. But all these little pieces are kind of necessary for him to get to that $1 million gross, even though by the time you put 20% here and 15% here pulled out, it sounds like it's a lot. At the end of the day, it's pretty good because these people take care of all that stuff for you. The agent is going to be able to get you into rooms that you'll never, ever have access to in most cases. Locally, you absolutely will. Like Gogo fans know how to get a hold of me.
Well, they know how to get
that's right.
And then everybody
send me a private message, folks. I'll take care of it. So I think that these things are stuff that people need to think about if they want to go to the next level. And you can think like, well, why would I give a manager 20%? Or why would I give an agent 15%? Well, because they're taking care of you. And they're taking care of the things that you don't have to do anymore. Like the manager worries about all that shit and advancing the show for you. You know, or it comes out of the agent's office where all that stuff happens. So I think if you're going to be serious about it, you got to contemplate the idea of having a team if you want to get out. And by team, I don't mean, you know, your cousin is the manager. Not that there's anything wrong with that either. I'm saying there's a difference between staying local, and there's nothing wrong with local. For instance, back in Texas, in Austin, they're called Red Dirt country bands. Red Dirt. No idea what it was when I moved from San Francisco to Texas. Turns out it's a pretty big deal in the triangle of Nebraska and Oklahoma and Texas, and you can just play those 3 states to thousands of people and have a pretty good little career until the Bud Light money, sponsorship money dries up, and then you just kind of, you know, dick in hand in the wind. But the smarter guys, they come east and they actually lose some money to establish themselves outside of the area. And I think that's really the smart thing. Like, you're going to make your bread in DC, and you're going to take your lumps when you go out on the road. But if you want to do that, you've got to do that. You know what I mean? You gotta eat a little to get to that next level. And I think that can be scary to some people. And I think it could not make a lot of financial sense to some people. And I think there's also, and I'm guessing here a little bit, but if you're used to kind of being big on your own home turf and able to do well locally, you're probably sitting back thinking, well, why in the world would I pay anybody 10% to book my shows when I can book them myself in DC? And that's all really super valid. But the agent is going to take care of you and get you access to places that you wouldn't. And sometimes it's an agent name that does it, or sometimes it's an agency name that does it. Or in your case, with our relationship that we've had over the last couple of years, I think we know each other enough that there's trust.
Yep.
You know, and that counts a lot too, that, you know, things I may not have thought of myself, or things I might be not thinking of myself, you'll come to me and say, have you thought of this? And I have other agents who do the same thing. That's kind of it's a really interesting and tight ecosystem, you know, like we all kind of lean into each other, especially now with what's going on with this coronavirus, is we're seeing a lot of people propping each other up to get through this with good relationship and honest dealing. And I think a good agent and a good manager, they're gonna earn their money. There are also plenty of shitty managers, don't get me wrong. And I've seen a few bad agents in my day, but for the most part, you know, we deal with pretty good ones because of the level that City Winery is on. And I'd be glad to help anybody with, if they wanted to know more about that too, about how to approach an agent. Which gets us back to, in a really long route, what do I look for when I'm booking shows? Have your final numbers. And that means where have you played? How many tickets have you sold? What was the price that you sold them at? What did you walk out with as a gross? Not only does that tell somebody like me what kind of business you do, it also gives me something to make a reasonable offer to you for a show. It's not just like I need this information to see if you're cool enough or big enough to play in my room. Because like I said, I've got the smaller room to develop you in. It really gives me a chance to not embarrass myself when I make an offer to your awesome band. So having things like that is really important. A lot of bands don't. A lot of local bands don't. Some do. An agent will always look for that type of thing, like what are you able to do? Unfortunately, that's all kind of part of the game too. But you know, it's the whole industry is just it's a ladder, and you work your way up the rungs.
That's what I was getting. That's what I was trying to get to. Is, you know, what I believe you're looking for is someone that can sell a certain amount of tickets, because it's a business. And to be honest with you, typical go-go promoters don't share with the bands how many tickets were sold. A lot of times the shows are packaged, and the bands, when I say packaged, that I mean multiple bands on the same ticket. And a lot of times the band, and I'm saying all this only because coming from playing in go-go bands for many, many years, I didn't know this stuff either. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That a lot of these bands don't realize that if you open for Backyard, those 1,000 tickets or whatever it is or those 1,000 people that you're playing in front of, they don't count for you. They count for Backyard, because Backyard is the headliner. And so knowing how many tickets you can sell at what price, and it has to be somewhat recent. You can't say 5 years ago we sold 800 tickets for $20. And then again, that is not, like you just said, it's not to say, oh, well, you're not good enough or big enough or cool enough to play my room, because we put smaller bands in your room. It's just to say that, okay, well, based upon what your recent ticket history is, this is the offer that we can make you. And there's always, the difference between City Winery and a traditional go-go venue is most go-go venues are just paying a flat guarantee. That's it. You get this amount of money and that's it. And and it doesn't matter how many people come and how many people say they're here for you or buy tickets on your ticket link or whatever. It doesn't matter. With City Winery, it's a little different because typically we do, most of our deals are what they call a versus deal, meaning it's a guaranteed amount versus a percentage of the door, whichever one is more.
That's right.
Right. So, yeah. So in order for you to make a reasonable offer, that makes sense to make the numbers work, you need to know where an artist is coming from, like how much, how many tickets they've sold recently, right?
Yeah, and not only that, man, it stands to reason. It's a business thing, right? And so when you go in, you tell me you did 200 tickets, and you come here and you sell 105 tickets. I don't come back and say, well, you told me 200. I come back and say, like, well, how do we promote this differently? What did I miss? You know what I mean? I just need a jumping off point. So, like, I don't expect everything to be a home run. Like, you can't club a home run every time. Sometimes there's singles and doubles, and you got to rod Carew your way through business. And there's nothing wrong with that either, So I think having just a common jump point to go on, that way we can figure out, like, was it worth to try again? Should we try it again? What are we doing differently this time? How are we promoting it differently? There are go-go bands who are really good at promoting. There are go-go bands that don't do a damn thing. There are country bands that are good at promoting. There are country bands that don't do a damn thing. That's how it goes. That
sort of brings me to my next question. Well, real quick, based on on what you just said, it's not only what do we do differently this time. Like if say I'm going to book ABC band at City Winery, and ABC band tells me that they sold 200 tickets last time they played at $20, and I go to you and I say, hey, ABC band says they sold 200 tickets, and then they come in there and they sell 50 tickets. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to have ABC band back again, and not only does it mean the next time, how do we promote this differently, but also it means that I'm not giving you the same deal that I gave you based off of you saying that you could sell 200 tickets. Like, I know, like, this is important stuff that a lot of go-go bands don't really understand, you know what I mean? Because it doesn't work that way in go-go. It's just like, oh, this is my price. And they think they have one price and it cuts across the board and it doesn't matter. Like when you're dealing with a concert venue, the deals are flexible based upon how well you do and how well you did the last time.
Yeah, and I think when we were first starting out, there were some bands that they had no idea what I was talking about with the versus deal.
Yeah, explain it to them.
Which, there's nothing wrong with a flat rate, but why take 5,000 where if we sell this place out, you can walk with 8,500, and that's happened. A couple of the bands who played here. And some bands, they know the room well enough, know, like, well, let's just do it a straight door deal because we know we're good for 300 or 400. And that's fine by me too. I want the band to walk out with as much as possible. I want it to be successful for everybody. It just stands to reason that I'm not pretending that I'm any kind of saint here, but I'm a big fan of fair business practice. And it's like I said, it seems to me that there's no reason to offer a band a flat guarantee when they can walk out with so much more,
and you know what you want, and everybody wins, and it's not.
Yeah, and the house still does fine, and then we have food and beverage, and that's a win-win for everybody. So I think that City Winery, specifically, City Winery DC for go-go bands has been really good in maybe opening some eyes to the possibility of, like, oh, there actually is legitimate money out there with a legitimate club by guys who treat every band the exact same way. Like those are the same deals I give neo soul bands that I give rock and roll bands. There's a guarantee and a back end, because if you do the work and you get the people in the door, you most definitely deserve the reward.
Right.
Well, that's good business.
Well, another thing for anybody who's in, sort of an up-and-coming band or knows somebody that's an up-and-coming band, the biggest go-go bands that I booked into City Winery and the biggest go-go bands that have been booked into City Winery are going in on a straight door deal, meaning there is no guarantee. And they're doing that because they know that they have their promotion together, because they have a team and they know that they're going to sell tickets. So it behooves them to go in, because it's important to explain, I think, that generally speaking, if you're offering a guarantee with a back end, generally speaking, that back end is smaller because you're taking, so say for example, it's, $1,000 guaranteed versus 60% of the door, meaning you either get $1,000 or you get 60% of the door, whichever one is more. But if you say to the band, well, okay, if you do a straight door deal with no $1,000 guarantee, then I'll give you 70% of the door, and the band can walk out with significantly more.
Yeah.
So that's why these bands are doing that, and so it's important. I think that there's a lot of misconception from especially smaller bands about who's responsible for promoting. That just the venue is responsible for promoting, and that they shouldn't be promoting themselves. And the reality is that the biggest bands in Gogo, when they play in City Winery, are betting on themselves and promoting themselves.
It's a hand in hand thing, man. It's up to the band to promote, and it's up to us to promote. And for guys like Backyard or Junkyard or Rare Essence, they know what they can do. So the door deal makes sense. It's a risk reward thing. It really minimizes my risk. So ergo, their reward is greater. Both ways are fine. You know what I mean? It's just there is more reward on a straight door deal for sure.
Right. What do you notice? And this is not just Gogo, but this is just across the board. I mean, to that point, what do you notice as a common thread between all of the artists that play Gogo or otherwise, and the ones that do well versus the ones that don't do well? Like, is there a common thread? Like you mentioned team, you mentioned promotion. Are there,
It's all that. Promotion is really the key. And like I said, it's on the club to do their part to do the lifting, and it's on the band to do their part and hit their socials and do the lifting. That's generally what works the best. Unless you happen to be like you're hitting town and like you're the flavor of the month, or you haven't been in town for a while and you can get some good press out of it. That happens too, where we'll have artists come in that haven't been in a while, and suddenly there'll be a piece that pops up and the Washingtonian or whatever. Helpful, you know what I mean? But with newspapers dying, really not something that happens a whole lot anymore.
Right.
So yeah, the bands that do the best are the bands that work the hardest. It's like anything in life. It's really kind of that simple. Sometimes you get a layup, and it just works out that way. Might be a little bit, and they tend to be things that are organic, but it's still promotion. It's organic promotion. Word of mouth type stuff that happens occasionally, but for the most part, the guys that do the best are the guys who go out there and beat the streets, and then we hit it on our end on our socials and our mailing list and all that type of stuff, and hopefully we meet in the middle. At the end of the day, I say this a lot. At the end of the day, I get paid to go to the track with my boss's money and try to put it on the right horse, which is. It's not easy to do 7 days a week. So it's really helpful when bands pitch in and do their part. And which is why stuff like bonus money is so important. Why would you not keep working to get to that bonus money? Even if it's $500, well, that's burgers and gas for the next stop and hotel rooms, by the way. You know what I mean? It makes sense for touring bands. It makes sense for local bands. Who doesn't want more? We're all here. We're all working for the same thing. We're here tonight. Let's keep selling tickets,
right?
And make some money.
Well, so sort of segueing to touring, because this is something that is a very misunderstood concept in Gogo, mainly because there are only a few bands in Gogo who've ever even been on tour before. I know that there's a lot of the most of the misconceptions that I hear are, man, if we go on tour, we're going to make all this money. And there's the misconception that somebody is going to make it happen for you to go on tour. Like there's this magical person that's just going to say, I want to put your band on tour. And that's not how it typically works. And generally speaking, when artists first start out touring, they don't make any money. Just like you were talking earlier about, the smarter guys that might go from Texas to the East Coast, and they know that they're going to make money in Texas, but they'll lose a little bit of money on the East Coast. So, for example, your guy that you were talking about in Austin that plays in Austin, and he does a West Coast run every now and again or whatever. I'm sure the first couple of times he went to the West Coast, he didn't make any money because nobody knew who he was. So I sort of like to flip that around. Like, okay, so this guy does really well in Austin, but just because he does really well in Austin doesn't mean you're going to bring him to DC and pay him the same amount that he makes in Austin because he sells tickets there. And there's somehow, just because of the nature of how GoGo works, there's a major disconnect with the idea that how much you get paid is tied to how many tickets you can sell. There's a lot of bands that just think, I have a price. This is my price. This is how much I cost. And I get more money if I go out of town because I have to pay for travel costs. And some of that is borne out by fact because because most of the experience that go-go bands have with going out of town is either going to colleges, where they have a large, typically HBCUs, where there's a large group of people from the DMV area who want to hear the music that's familiar to them. Colleges have budgets. They're going to pay more money than a traditional venue would because their business model is not that they need to make their money back off the tickets. They have a budget, that they spend. And the other thing is there are promoters in DC who have started to do these trips, like the Miami Takeover, my buddy Wiley that does that, or people will go to Puerto Rico, or they'll go to Mexico, or wherever, All-Star Weekend, and essentially what they're doing is they're taking a huge group of people from DC, going to another town, another city, and that's the band's perception of what playing out of town means, which is totally different than building, another market. Like, it's totally different than the Miami Takeover is not the same thing as Backyard going to Miami and playing for people that live in Miami.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So
no, it's true.
Yeah. So I understand where the misconception comes from because that's the only thing that's been happening. But so say, City Winery is a chain. You have what? New York, Chicago, Boston, Atlanta.
Yeah. You're doing good, Bert. We have 7 of them. That's very good. Boston, yeah, you got them.
I got
Nashville. You got Nashville.
Oh, I missed Nashville.
You did good though. That was really good.
I'm not really a country guy, so I missed. That's what I missed Nashville. But so say for example, Backyard wants to go play in, let's not say Atlanta or Philly because there's probably some. Let's go with Chicago because there's virtually no footprint for Backyard, for GoGo in Chicago.
I think. Go ahead. Continue.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, honestly, I would have picked Chicago for GoGo. I think it's a wide open city to the different types of music that there is. Typically, City Winery Chicago does really well. They kill with anything that kind of skews urban anyhow. Like jazz does really great, even. It's a really hip town that way. I think that would make sense as opposed to trying to run them through Nashville or something like that.
Right.
I think the problem you're probably going to run into with taking a go-go band out on the road is the size versus the guarantee, the cost coming in.
That's what
I would almost scale down before I go out on the road. If I were,
can you go a little bit slower and explain exactly what you mean by that? I know what you mean by that, but I want to make sure that people who are watching know what you mean.
I think there are all different ways to do it. With this coronavirus, for instance, we just had Speech from Arrested Development did a 3-piece thing in Atlanta. It was a morning show, but it was a way to get around current restrictions and to still be able to get out there and make some music. An extreme example for sure, but I think it doesn't make a lot of sense to send any go-go band, no matter how well established, out on a tour with 12 or 10 or 8 pieces, but it does make sense to send them out maybe in a scaled down version of that, which isn't to say that anyone is more important than the other. I'm just saying.
Well, why do you say that? I know why you say that, but why do you say that? Why does it not make sense to put a 12-piece band?
Just what it's going to cost you financially just to feed and to house compared to guarantees, unless, like you said, you're on the college circuit. A thing that I've always been kind of wondering, especially in light of Go-Go now being the official music of DC, and one way that does make sense for you to Go-Go to get out there in the rest of the world, even though it kind of flies in the face of what Go-Go is all about, is doing performing arts centers. Mm-hmm. But doing performing arts centers being grant written by DC. I know that Texas does that. I hate to keep coming back to Texas, but I have a lot of experience in San Francisco, Texas. But they do. They'll underwrite artists to send them out, and it's a way that allows them to get on the road. Now, I know playing a PAC in Rhode Island, Fall River, to a bunch of seated people might not be what Go-Go is about, but it's a way that I was kind of thinking about. That's one way to get it out there. Yeah. And not that it is in any sense an artifact, but it is it's a really culturally specific, legitimate thing.
A living, breathing piece of history. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's still doing its thing. And I think if it were presented like that, it would be a leg up in promoting, and it would be a leg up in getting into really legitimate venues in a flash out of nowhere. And I think that's something that a smart fellow like yourself should look into.
It's actually something I considered, although I didn't think about having DC underwrite it. I just thought, because normally PACs, when we say PACs, we're talking about performing arts centers, which are places like the Kennedy Center, which have a different business model. That's the important thing to understand, is that a lot of these different venues, from casinos to clubs to nightclubs to performing arts centers to stadiums, all have different business models in terms of the way they make their money and in terms of the deals that they're able to offer to artists. Colleges, again, like I said before, are not worried about making their money back necessarily on ticket sales. Performing arts centers typically fund themselves by annual memberships, similar to like sports teams with season tickets. So they have a little bit more flexibility. But the only thing with the performing arts centers is they book at least a year out versus 30 to 60 to 30 to 90 days out or whatever. So it takes a little bit more work to get to them. But yeah, I never actually thought about having seeing if DC government would pitch in a little bit with that. That's a good thought.
It was really the only way I could think about how do you get a legitimate full-size go-go band out on the road. And of course, this is also going to take it's going to take an agent with connections, and that's how it's done. But again, that 10% you're giving up the agent is going to be completely worth it to get it to a PAC.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I happen to have a tribute band that I've booked at a few PACs, so that's convenient. So thank you for that idea. I appreciate it. We do have one question from my buddy Chris Burch. Chris Burch is a great guy. He runs a local print and graphic design company, and he does real estate. He is the guy that turned me on to StreamYard, this fancy little gizmo that we're using to stream now. And I have the questions at the bottom. So he said that he missed the method of profit sharing for the door revenue. I love the idea. I assume that it is minus expenses. What expenses? And yes, it is minus expenses. I think both of us gave an overly simplified version of it before, so as not to confuse people, but specifically for Chris, typically what expenses are included, or what expenses need to be cleared before you do the revenue split with the band in a typical versus deal?
In a back end deal?
Yeah.
Typically it'll be production, which for us is like $250. and advertising will take a small advertising fee. But again, it's really tip of the iceberg, when you figure in not only newspaper advertisements and online advertisement, but
radio. You guys do radio sometimes too. Yep.
WHUR, our contract with HUR. It's like it's asking for a small bit back on. You spend a lot more per show.
Yeah, well, you guys have the most reasonable expenses to clear. I mean, obviously, you're dealing with a Live Nation venue. They've got a $2,000-3,000 house nut or something like that. Just you've got to clear before you start seeing any percentage split.
Yeah, it's true. It's the higher up you climb, the more stuff that gets tacked on. That fellow I was telling you about that could do the 2,000 cap room. He cleared somewhere around $70,000 and walked with 40.
Yeah,
because of costs.
Yeah,
but that's the nature of playing on that specific field. For a smaller club such as ours, we just look for a little piece back as far as what's spent, and that also it helps hedge against getting our ass kicked, which that happens too, because when it's 150 people through the door to break even and only 75 people come, not only we eat the guarantee,
Yeah, you're eating all the expenses too. Yeah.
Yeah, we won't even get to those expenses to get the back end. We'll just eat the whole thing.
Right.
That's a bummer when that one happens, but it happens.
Right. Well, Chris has another very important question. What is the B on your cap? He thought it was Ravens at first, but obviously it's not.
No, son. We represent the Southern Maryland Blue Crabs.
There you go.
Last in the division and first in our hearts.
You said last in the division and first in your hearts?
Constantly last in the division. Constantly.
That is funny. That is funny. I forgot you were a big baseball fan.
Station Nation, baby.
Oh, Rome Casanova had the same question too. He thought it was Buffalo Sabres. So what's the name of the team again?
The Southern Maryland Blue Crabs.
Southern Maryland Blue Crabs. That is the best.
In wonderful Waldorf, Maryland, the Paris of Maryland.
That is the second best name because the local sports team, and the first best name, of course, is the Capital City Gogo.
That is pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking to see if there are any other questions. Most of the other stuff is our comments, very complimentary comments. So thank you specifically, mainly to DJ Noise, who has been, and Learning with Gogo, both, who have been really supportive of this series and sharing, the flyers and everything. I really appreciate it. I may know you guys personally, but I don't really remember if I do. But if I don't, that makes it even more special to me that I really appreciate you guys sharing it. Learning with Gogo, I'm not super familiar, but it's a cool thing. It's like a thing geared towards kids to teach them through Gogo. And I only dove into it a little bit, but I want to dive into it a lot more. So it's pretty cool because, definitely I want to try to get the youth engaged back into Gogo again. John, I know you don't get a chance to go to many of the shows because you work during the day most of the time. And you let the staff do it. But have you been? I don't even think I ever asked you. Have you been able to make it to any of the shows that we've done, or you don't get a chance to go to any of them?
Oh yeah, man. I've seen Black Alley more than once. I love those guys. They're just good dudes.
Yeah.
And dudettes. Backyard for sure.
Oh, you did make it to a backyard show? Okay.
Yeah. Belladonna. I spent a New Year's Eve with Belladonna.
Nice.
Beyond the Go-Go guys, just some of the other cats you sent my way, like Brian Mills, we're always glad to see him in the house, and the dudes from Vibe Band. They're kind of like family now, What did we do? We did Secret Society on New Year's Eve, right?
Yep, we did.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was because they here's how cool the local scene is. Those guys and the guys from Vibe Band, picking up and playing Mondays and Tuesday nights for me to help fill in. So, it made sense to hey, let's give them the New Year's Eve upstairs. as kind of a way of saying thanks, you know. And that's
Right.
we feel really tight with all the bands that come in here that are local bands. We really do enjoy them, and the go-go bands for sure. I can hardly wait to get What Band back in here again. They got rained out with this coronavirus. Backyard lost a gig. We got to get them back in. There's a lot of work to do when we get on the other side.
Junkyard. I feel so terrible with Junkyard because not only have they been canceled twice at City Winery, but even prior to that, I thought I was going to be taking over the Go-Go stuff back at Live Casino again last year, maybe the year before, and they decided to go another direction. And so I had a date for Junkyard and everything, and then I had to say, oh, you know what, sorry, never mind. And then we booked him in with you guys, and I don't remember what happened, but we had to postpone the show. We rescheduled it, and then coronavirus happened. And
I totally fucked up. That's what happened the first time.
I wasn't going to throw you under the bus, but you know.
No, you can. It's totally allowed. I'm sorry, guys. I'm so sorry about that one.
Oh, Rome, I don't remember you. I was talking about the other two guys. Chris wants to know, and you can demur or defer this question if you don't want to, because we're actually about out of time. But he wants to know: do you want to know or share? Chris is the straight up business dude, so he's got all the business questions. Do you know or want to share how much in revenue comes from entertainment versus F&B, like the winery, the wine side? Like, do you know what the percentage is? How much comes in, from entertainment versus F&B?
Not a clue, Chris. No offense. I'd share with you if I even knew the numbers off the top of my head. My job is pretty much 70 hours a week with my head in the computer, trying to book 7 days a week times 2 floors. I can't remember the last time I looked at a food and beverage amount.
Yeah,
honestly, it's just not my world. I let my GM worry about that shit.
Yeah. Hey, John.
I should know.
That's all right, man. It's all right. We'll let you slide. I really, 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 really appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you very much. And I apologize. I thought I was going to make you a YouTube star today, but of course, I thought I was going to make you an Instagram star today, but then we had to switch over to YouTube. I'm glad that as we went along, your face cleared up, so now everybody can see how handsome you are. And I'm glad, we were talking before we came on. It was kind of funny that you and I have literally been on the phone almost every day for probably the last 2 years, like to the point where I feel like you're my closest friend, and I had never seen your face before today.
It's funny. More than half the time, we're not doing any business. We're just bullshitting.
I know. Just talking shit. But, well, that's an important point. Was
that an hour already, by the way? That was an hour?
Yeah. Yep, it's an hour. Over an hour. We're 3 minutes over. But see, if we were on Instagram, it would have just cut us off. But since we're on YouTube now, it's letting us go a little bit. But I don't want to go too long. But I do want to ask everybody that's on, please click the subscribe button below. John, you go on YouTube when you're done too, please, and please click the subscribe button as well. And this is the reason why it's important right now, because right now, the YouTube for GOGOTIX is youtube.com/gobbledygook, because I need a certain amount of subscribers to be able to claim youtube.com/GOGOTIX or get GOGOTIX or whatever. So if you're on watching this, there's like 20 or so people on, or 16 people on, I guess, watching. Please click the subscribe button below right now and help me get to whatever the magic number is that I can't remember at the top of my head now. John, thank you very, 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 very much. I appreciate it, and I'm sure you'll call me tomorrow and ask you some crazy shit. So I look forward to talking to you then.
I'd like to see the director's cut of this. We're not finished. But really, thanks for having me, and thanks everybody for tuning in, and stay safe. And I'm really looking forward to getting on the other side of this fucking virus and being able to get back out and do shows.
Indeed. That was awesome, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
All right, everybody. Peace.
Thanks, everyone. All right.